You don't become undefeated by avoiding battle. You become undefeated by never losing to yourself. The strongest warriors don't just train their bodies, they train their perception. The undefeated mind is disciplined in thought, flexible in movement, and deadly in silence. Musashi won over 60 duels because he refused to be shaken by doubt, ego, or emotion. He studied himself, mastered himself. And by doing that, he became unbeatable. That's the way. That's the code. Follow it, and nothing can touch you. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind, and tell us, where are you watching from? Your mind is the first battlefield. Win there, and everything else becomes simple. Listen carefully. The greatest enemy you will ever face is the one that lives between your ears. It whispers doubt when you need certainty. It breeds fear when you need courage. It creates chaos when you need clarity. This enemy knows your weaknesses better than any opponent ever could. It strikes when you're tired, when you're vulnerable, when you're alone with your thoughts. I learned this truth through blood and steel. In my first duel at 13, my opponent was older, stronger, more experienced, but he had already lost to himself. I watched his eyes dart with uncertainty. I saw his shoulders tense with fear. His mind betrayed him before I ever drew my sword. The way of the warrior begins with this understanding. Defeat your inner enemy first, and no outer enemy can touch you. But here's what most people don't understand. This battle isn't won through positive thinking or wishful meditation. It's won through discipline, through practice, through the relentless pursuit of self-mastery. Every morning you must examine your thoughts like a swordsmith examines his blade. Where are the cracks? Where is the weakness? What thoughts serve you, and which ones lead you toward defeat? I trained my mind the same way I trained my sword technique, through repetition, through challenge, through constant refinement. When doubt arose, I didn't ignore it. I studied it. I understood its patterns. I learned to recognize its voice so I could silence it when it mattered most. The mind that loses to itself is the mind that creates excuses instead of solutions. It tells you why something can't be done instead of how it can be accomplished. It focuses on the opponent's strength instead of your own preparation. It lives in the past failure or the future fear, never in the present moment where power resides. Let me ask you this. How many battles have you lost before they even began? How many times have you defeated yourself with your own thoughts? How many opportunities have you surrendered to the enemy within? The undefeated mind operates differently. It sees challenge as sharpening stone. It views opposition as training. It treats failure as information, not identity. When this mind encounters difficulty, it doesn't ask, "Why me?" It asks, "How do I overcome this?" This is not philosophy. This is strategy. This is survival. In every duel I fought, I watched my opponents lose to themselves before I ever engaged them. They would arrive already beaten by their reputation, by their fear, by their own internal chatter. Their bodies were present, but their minds had already surrendered. You cannot afford this luxury, not if you want to become undefeated. Start today. Begin with small victories over your own mind. When it tells you to quit, continue for one more minute. When it whispers that you're not good enough, prove it wrong through action. When it creates excuses, respond with discipline. The path to becoming undefeated doesn't start with conquering others. It starts with conquering yourself. Win this battle first. Everything else will follow. Your mind is either your greatest weapon or your most dangerous enemy. Choose carefully. Train accordingly. Fight wisely. The way begins now. Train until you no longer flinch, until habit becomes your armor. Most people see discipline as chains. They view structure as imprisonment. They mistake routine for death. This is why they remain weak. This is why they lose. True discipline is not restriction. It is liberation. It frees you from the tyranny of impulse. It releases you from the prison of inconsistency. It breaks the chains of mediocrity that bind ordinary minds. I discovered this truth in the mountains of Kumano, where I spent months in solitude. training from dawn until darkness consumed the sky. No crowds, no comfort, no excuses, just the endless repetition of movement, breath, and blade. Each morning I performed the same cuts, the same stances, the same breathing patterns, day after day, week after week, until my body moved without conscious thought, until my sword became an extension of my will. This was not punishment. This was preparation for freedom. The undisciplined. Mind is a slave to every distraction, every emotion, every fleeting desire. It cannot choose its response because it has never trained its responses. It reacts instead of acts. It follows instead of leads. It submits to circumstances instead of shaping them. But the disciplined mind, it chooses, it decides, it commands. When you train until movement becomes instinct, you free yourself from hesitation in the moment of truth. When you practice until technique becomes natural, you liberate yourself from conscious thought during combat. When you repeat until excellence becomes habit, you release yourself from the burden of trying to be great. You simply are. Here's what most people don't understand about discipline. It multiplies your options instead of limiting them. The musician who practices scales for years gains the freedom to play any melody. The warrior who drills basic cuts 10,000 times gains the freedom to strike from any angle. The mind that submits to discipline gains the freedom to act without doubt. I trained my sword work until I could strike in darkness. I practiced footwork until I could move on any terrain without thought. I disciplined my breathing until I could remain calm under any pressure. This wasn't restriction, this was preparing for total freedom of action. But let me ask you this: what are you training? What disciplines are you following? What habits are becoming your armor? Most people train their weaknesses instead of their strengths. They practice complaining instead of solving. They perfect excuses instead of execution. They discipline themselves in mediocrity and wonder why they feel trapped. The way of the undefeated mind requires different training. You must discipline your thoughts like you would discipline your sword technique. You must practice focus like you would practice footwork. You must train your responses until they become instinctive. Start with the morning. Win the first hour, and you set the tone for victory all day. Create a routine that serves your strength, not your comfort. Practice the fundamentals of your craft until they become unconscious. Train your mind to see opportunity where others see obstacle. This is not easy. Discipline never is. But here's the secret. The difficulty is temporary. The freedom is permanent. Every morning you choose discipline over impulse, you become stronger. Every time you train when you don't feel like training, you build unshakable will. Every moment you practice excellence, you move closer to the place where greatness becomes natural. The sword that cuts deepest is the one that has been sharpened most often. The mind that strikes truest is the one that has been trained most thoroughly. The warrior who moves with perfect timing is the one who has practiced timing until it became instinct. Discipline is not the enemy of freedom. Discipline is the path to freedom. Train accordingly. Stillness in chaos is not passive. It's lethal. Control the storm by controlling yourself. In my 60th duel, I faced a man whose reputation for speed was legendary. They called him Lightning Strike. His blade moved faster than most eyes could follow. He had killed 17 men with his quick-draw technique, but I defeated him before he ever drew his sword. How? I remained perfectly calm, while he grew increasingly agitated by my stillness. His breathing quickened, his muscles tensed. His mind raced with strategy and fear. By the time we engaged, he had already exhausted himself with internal chaos. My calmness had become his defeat. This is the power of the undefeated mind. It remains centered while everything around it spins into madness. Calm is not the absence of conflict. Calm is presence within conflict. It's the eye of the hurricane that watches the storm without being consumed by it. It's the stillness that sees clearly when others are blinded by motion. Most people mistake calmness for weakness. They think the quiet warrior lacks intensity. They believe stillness means inaction. This ignorance costs them everything. True calm is not empty. It's full. Full of awareness, full of readiness, full of controlled power waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The calm mind is like a loaded bow, relaxed until the instant of release, then devastatingly precise. I learned this in the forests of Iga, practicing sword cuts while wild boars charged through the underbrush around me. At first, every sound made me flinch. Every movement broke my concentration. But gradually, I learned to maintain inner stillness regardless of outer chaos. The breakthrough came when I realized that calmness is not something you find, it's something you create. It's not a gift. It's a skill. It's not a feeling. It's a choice. Here's what most people don't understand about maintaining calm. It requires more strength than losing control. It takes more energy to remain centered than to explode with emotion. It demands more courage to stay still than to react wildly, but this is where power lives. In the space between stimulus and response. In the pause between provocation and action. In the stillness that chooses its moment rather than being chosen by the moment. When your opponent is angry, your calmness becomes their weakness. When the situation is chaotic, your stillness becomes your advantage. When others are reacting, your choosing becomes your victory. But let me ask you this, where do you lose your calm? What situations steal your stillness? What people or circumstances make you abandon your center? These are your training grounds. These are the places where you must practice the art of remaining unmoved while everything moves around you. The calm mind sees what the agitated mind misses. It notices the pattern in the chaos. It spots the opportunity in the crisis. It finds the opening that panic-stricken minds cannot perceive. This is not about suppressing emotion. It's about choosing your response. The truly calm warrior feels fear, anger, and excitement, just like everyone else. But they don't let these feelings control their actions. They acknowledge the emotion, then choose their response based on strategy, not impulse. Practice this daily. When someone provokes you, pause before responding. When pressure builds, breathe before acting. When chaos erupts around you, find your center before moving. Train your nervous system like you would train your sword arm. Start with small challenges. Maintain calm during minor frustrations. Build up to larger tests. Stay centered during major crises. Eventually, your stillness becomes unshakable. The warrior who controls their inner storm can control any outer battle. The mind that remains calm under pressure becomes the mind that wins under pressure. Your calmness is not weakness. It's your deadliest weapon. The opponent who cannot disturb your peace cannot defeat you. The situation that cannot break your stillness cannot break you. In a world full of noise, your silence becomes power. In a world full of chaos, your calm becomes victory. Control the storm by controlling yourself. Everything else will follow. Pride blinds, attachment weakens. Let go or be broken by what you cling to. The most dangerous opponent I ever faced was not the strongest swordsman or the fastest warrior. It was my own ego after my 20th consecutive victory. Success had made me drunk. Praise had made me stupid. My reputation had become my weakness, and I didn't even know it. I walked into my 21st duel expecting easy victory. After all, I was Miyamoto Musashi, the undefeated. My name alone should have been enough to secure triumph. But my opponent didn't care about my reputation. He cared only about winning. While I was busy protecting my image, he was busy studying my patterns. While I was concerned with looking invincible, he was focused on finding my vulnerabilities. My ego had made me careless, and carelessness in combat is death. I won that duel, but barely. And in those few moments when defeat seemed certain, I learned the most important lesson of my life. Ego is the hidden enemy that kills more warriors than any sword ever could. Your ego wants to be right more than it wants to win. It cares more about appearance than achievement. It protects reputation instead of pursuing improvement. This makes it the most treacherous opponent you will ever face. The ego cannot learn because it already knows everything. It cannot adapt because it's already perfect. It cannot grow because it's already complete. This blindness is deadly in a world that constantly changes and challenges. I have seen masters fall to beginners because pride prevented them from taking their opponent. Seriously, I have watched skilled warriors lose to inferior fighters because ego made them predictable. I have witnessed brilliant minds destroyed by the very success that fed their arrogance. Here's what most people don't understand about ego. It grows stronger with every victory and weaker with every defeat. Success feeds it, while failure starves it. This is why the truly wise warrior treats both triumph and disaster as teachers, not trophies. The moment you become attached to your image becomes your limitation. The second you start protecting your reputation becomes your prison. When you begin believing your own legend, your legend becomes your downfall. But let me ask you this: what are you attached to? What reputation are you protecting? What image are you afraid to lose? These attachments are chains. They bind you to old ways of thinking. They lock you into patterns that may have worked yesterday but will fail tomorrow. They make you fight to stay the same instead of growing to become better. The undefeated mind holds everything lightly. Victories, defeats, praise, criticism, all are equally valuable as information, equally dangerous as identity. The moment you make any outcome part of who you are, you stop being who you could become. I learned to treat my wins like borrowed clothes, useful for the moment, but not worth dying to keep. I began viewing my reputation like weather, sometimes favorable, sometimes harsh, but always changing and never permanent. This doesn't mean you don't care about results. It means you care more about the process that creates results. You focus on improvement rather than image. You pursue mastery rather than maintaining appearances. The ego wants comfort. It seeks the familiar. It chooses the safe path that protects what it already has. But the way of the warrior demands discomfort. It requires venturing into unknown territory. It insists on risking everything you are for everything you might become. When someone challenges your technique, your ego wants to defend. Your warrior spirit wants to learn. When someone questions your methods, your ego wants to argue. Your warrior spirit wants to examine. When someone defeats you, your ego wants to make excuses. Your warrior spirit wants to understand how. Practice letting go daily. Release attachment to outcomes. Abandon identification with images. Stop defending positions and start exploring possibilities. The warrior who has nothing to lose is impossible to defeat. The mind that clings to nothing cannot be broken. The spirit that identifies with no fixed form can adapt to any challenge. Your ego is not your friend. It's the enemy that wears your face and speaks with your voice. It promises protection, but delivers prison. It offers comfort, but creates weakness. Let go or be broken by what you cling to. The way demands this sacrifice. Make it willingly, or life will make it for you. Structure builds skill, but fluidity wins wars. Be formless, like water, like wind. In my early years, I was obsessed with perfect technique. Every cut had to follow precise angles. Every stance had to match traditional forms. Every movement had to conform to classical patterns. I was a beautiful failure. My sword work looked flawless in practice, but in real combat, I was rigid, predictable, and vulnerable. My opponents could read my intentions because I was trapped inside the very forms I had mastered. The breakthrough came during a duel with a drunken monk who fought with a broken oar. His technique was terrible by any standard, yet he nearly killed me. Why? Because he had no form to predict, no pattern to anticipate, no structure to exploit. That night, I understood the paradox that separates masters from students. You must first learn the rules perfectly, then learn to break them perfectly. Form is the foundation, not the ceiling. It's the launching pad, not the destination. It gives you the basics so you can eventually transcend them. Think of language. You learn grammar and vocabulary first, rigid rules and fixed meanings. But poetry comes when you bend those rules, when you make words dance in ways that formal structure never imagined. Combat is the same. Master the forms, then forget them in favor of pure expression. I spent years perfecting the 5 basic cuts of swordsmanship, thousands of repetitions until each angle was precise, each timing was perfect. But the real learning began when I stopped, thinking about which cut to use, and started feeling what the moment demanded. The undefeated mind doesn't ask, "What technique should I apply?" It asks, "What does this situation require?" It doesn't follow predetermined patterns. It creates new patterns in real time. Here's what most people don't understand about mastering form. It's not about permanent adherence. It's about temporary structure that builds permanent capability. The form teaches your body how to move efficiently, but efficiency in combat requires adaptation, not repetition. Water takes the shape of any container, yet it remains water. Wind flows around any obstacle, yet it retains its power. The formless warrior adapts to any opponent while maintaining their essential strength. But let me ask you this. Where are you trapped by your own expertise? What forms have become your limitations? What structures that once served you now restrict you? Most people never escape their training. They become prisoners of their own preparation. They master techniques, but never master the art of choosing. Which technique to abandon? True mastery is not about perfect technique. It's about perfect timing. It's not about following forms. It's about responding fluidly to what is actually happening, not what you expected to happen. I developed my 2-sword technique by forgetting everything I knew about single-sword combat. Traditional forms said you couldn't effectively wield 2 blades simultaneously, but I wasn't interested in what tradition said was impossible. I was interested in what reality made necessary. The forms had taught me balance, timing, and precision with 1 sword. But the principle beneath the forms, the essence of efficient movement, could be applied in entirely new ways. I kept the foundation, discarded the limitations. This is how innovation happens. This is how you become undefeatable. You master the established way completely, then forge your own path fearlessly. Practice this approach in everything you do. Learn the rules of your craft until they become instinctive. Then experiment, adapt, evolve. Let the situation teach you what no textbook can. The master who is trapped by their mastery is no longer a master. They're a museum piece, beautiful, historical, and ultimately irrelevant to current challenges. Your opponents will study your patterns. They will prepare for your usual methods. They will expect you to fight the way you've always fought. This is why formlessness becomes your advantage. When you have no fixed form, you cannot be anticipated. When you follow no predictable pattern, you cannot be countered. When you adapt fluidly to each new challenge, you become impossible to prepare. For the ultimate technique is having no technique. The perfect form is being formless. The highest skill is the ability to transcend skill itself, master the structure, then break free from it. Be like water, adaptable, persistent, unstoppable. Reacting is weakness. Choose every action like it's the only one that matters. The difference between a master and a novice is not speed, it's intention. The novice moves fast and thinks slow. The master thinks fast and moves with purpose. I learned this lesson in my duel with Sasaki Kojiro on Ganryu Island. He was faster than me. His reach was longer than mine. His reputation was more fearsome than mine. But I defeated him before our swords ever crossed, because I controlled the battle with my mind while he reacted with his emotions. I arrived late, deliberately disrupting his mental preparation. I carved my wooden sword from an oar during the boat ride, showing that even my weapon was chosen thoughtfully, not emotionally. By the time we faced each other, He was reacting to my strategy while I was executing my plan. This is the power of thought before movement. It transforms combat from reaction into creation. Most people live in reaction mode. Someone speaks, they respond immediately. A situation changes, they move instantly. A challenge appears, they act reflexively. This makes them predictable, controllable, and ultimately defeatable. The undefeated mind operates differently. It pauses between stimulus and response. It chooses its action instead of being chosen by circumstances. It creates the moment instead of being created by the moment. But here's what most people don't understand about thinking before moving. It's not about hesitation, it's about intention. It's not about being slow, it's about being deliberate. The pause is not delay, it's preparation for decisive action. In sword combat, the warrior who strikes first often loses because they have revealed their intention without seeing their opponent's response. The warrior who strikes second wins because they have seen the opening and chosen their target. This principle applies beyond the battlefield. In business, the company that reacts to every market change without strategy fails. The company that responds thoughtfully to genuine opportunities succeeds. In relationships, the person who reacts emotionally to every provocation creates chaos. The person who chooses their response creates harmony. Let me ask you this: how many of your problems come from reacting instead of responding? How many opportunities have you missed because you moved without thinking? How many battles have you lost because you let others choose the timing and terms of engagement? Every movement should serve a purpose. Every word should advance your position. Every action should bring you closer to your objective. If you cannot explain why you're doing something, you probably shouldn't be doing it. I trained myself to find the pause between thought and action, then fill that pause with strategic thinking. What is my opponent expecting? What am I trying to accomplish? What are the possible consequences of this movement? What alternatives do I have? This mental discipline transforms every interaction into a strategic engagement. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the architect of outcomes. The thinking warrior asks different questions than the reacting warrior. Instead of, how do I respond to this, they ask, how do I want this to end? Instead of, what should I do now, they ask, what needs to happen next? Instead of, how do I counter their move, they ask, how do I make them counter mine? Practice this daily. Before you speak in meetings, pause and choose your words strategically. Before you respond to criticism, pause and consider what outcome you want. Before you make any significant move, pause and ensure it serves your larger purpose. The pause is not weakness. It's where power is born. The space between thought and action is where victory is decided. The moment of choice is where legends separate themselves from the ordinary. Your opponents want you to react because reactions are predictable. They want you to move quickly because speed without purpose is just motion without meaning. They want you to respond emotionally because emotions cloud judgment. Give them none of these advantages. Think before you move. Choose before you act. Plan before you engage. The warrior who controls the timing controls the battle. The mind that chooses its responses controls its destiny. Every action should be chosen, not compelled. Every movement should be intentional, not reflexive. Every response should serve your strategy, not satisfy your impulses. Reacting is weakness. Choosing is strength. Make every action count. Failure is not defeat. It is a lesson your pride refused to learn. Early in my training, I was humiliated by an old man who fought with nothing but a wooden staff. I had studied sword technique for years. He had never held a formal weapon in his life. Yet he dismantled my attacks with such ease that I felt like a child playing with toys. My first instinct was to make excuses. The ground was uneven. I was tired from travel. His weapon gave him an unfair advantage. But as I walked away, burning with embarrassment, I realized something crucial. This old man had just given me the most valuable gift any warrior can receive, He had shown me my limitations. Every opponent is a teacher, but your greatest teachers are the ones who expose your weaknesses. They reveal the gaps in your knowledge, the flaws in your technique, the blind spots in your awareness. They force you to confront the uncomfortable truth about where you really stand. Most people run from this education. They avoid opponents who might challenge them. They stay in their comfort zones where they can maintain their illusions of competence. They choose battles they know they can win instead of fights they need to experience. This is why they never grow. This is why they remain mediocre. The way of the undefeated mind demands different thinking. You must seek out opposition that tests your limits. You must welcome challenges that expose your weaknesses. You must embrace the uncomfortable truth that everyone you meet knows something you don't. After my defeat by the old man with the staff, I didn't sulk or quit. I found him the next day and asked him to teach me. For 3 months, I learned how spacing, timing, and leverage could overcome pure technique. He taught me that weapons are tools, but understanding is the real advantage. That lesson saved my life in countless future duels. Here's what most people don't understand about learning from opponents. It requires abandoning your ego's need to be right in favor of your spirit's desire to improve. You must value growth more than image, truth more than comfort, progress more than pride. But let me ask you this. Who were your teachers in disguise? Which opponents have exposed weaknesses you're still ignoring? What lessons are you refusing to learn because accepting them would hurt your self-image? Every person who defeats you, challenges you, or makes you uncomfortable is offering you intelligence about your current limitations. They're showing you where you need to develop, what you need to practice, how you need to evolve. The warrior who was faster than me taught me about speed. The one who was stronger taught me about power. The one who was more experienced taught me about strategy. Even the one who was luckier taught me about preparation, because luck favors the prepared mind. I kept a mental record of every defeat, every close call, every moment when I barely survived. Not to dwell on failure, but to extract the lessons before moving forward. What had my opponent seen that I had missed? What technique had they used that I didn't understand? What principle had they applied that I needed to learn? This approach transforms every setback into a setup for future victory. Every loss becomes information for future wins. Every opponent becomes a source of improvement rather than a source of shame. The greatest masters are not those who never lose. They're those who learn fastest from their losses. The undefeated mind is not one that never fails. It's one that never fails to grow from failure. Practice this perspective daily. When someone corrects you, thank them for the information. When someone challenges your ideas, examine your assumptions. When someone defeats you in any area, study their methods. Your opponents are not your enemies, they're your education. They reveal truths about yourself that comfort never could. They teach lessons that victory never would. The warrior who learns from every opponent becomes unbeatable, not because they never lose, but because they never lose the same way twice. Embrace your teachers, especially the ones who don't look like teachers. Learn from everyone, especially those who make you uncomfortable. Grow from every challenge, especially the ones that expose your limitations. Failure is not defeat. It is tuition paid for wisdom you couldn't acquire any other way. Solitude sharpens the blade. Be comfortable in silence and become lethal in any crowd. For 7 years, I disappeared into the mountains. No teachers, no training partners, no audience to impress. Just me, my sword, and the relentless pursuit of perfection in silence. Most warriors thought I was wasting my time. They trained in schools, sparred with partners, learned from masters. They believed that combat skills could only be developed through constant interaction with others. They were wrong. When I emerged from those mountains, I was a different fighter entirely. Not because I had learned new techniques from others, but because I had discovered truths about myself that only solitude could reveal. Training alone forces you to face your weaknesses without the distraction of comparison. There's no one to impress, no one to blame, no one to make excuses to, just you and the brutal honesty of your own limitations. In solitude, you cannot hide behind the performance of training. You cannot fool yourself with the illusion of progress. Every flaw becomes magnified, every weakness becomes obvious. Every mistake becomes a teacher that you cannot ignore or argue with. This is why most people avoid training alone. It's uncomfortable. It's honest. It strips away the social validation that makes practice feel worthwhile. But this discomfort is precisely what makes it valuable. When you train with others, you adapt to their rhythms, their expectations, their limitations. You develop skills that work against familiar opponents, but fail against unknown challenges. You become good at beating the people you practice with, but unprepared for the people you've never met. But here's what most people don't understand about solitary training. It's not about isolation. It's about self-discovery. It's not about avoiding others. It's about understanding yourself so deeply that you can adapt to anyone. In the mountains, I fought imaginary opponents. I practiced against shadows, trees, and rocks. I developed techniques that no school taught because I wasn't constrained by what others believed was possible. I learned to move with my own natural rhythm instead of copying someone else's style. This created something unique, a fighting style that no opponent could prepare for because it had never been seen before. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you practiced your craft alone? When did you last work on improvement without an audience? How often do you develop skills in private before displaying them in public? Most people only practice when others are watching. They only improve when they receive external validation. They only work hard when someone is keeping score. This makes them dependent on others for motivation, progress, and validation. The undefeated mind operates differently. It finds motivation in solitude. It measures progress internally. It validates itself through the quality of work, not the applause of observers. Train alone to discover your authentic style. Fight everyone to test its effectiveness. Solitude teaches you who you are. Combat teaches you who you can become. I spent my mountain years not just practicing sword techniques, but developing my ability to remain centered regardless of circumstances. I learned to be comfortable with my own thoughts, confident in my own judgment, content with my own company. This inner stability became my greatest advantage in combat. While my opponents were shaken by the crowd, the stakes, or the pressure, I remained unchanged because I had learned to perform at my best when no one was watching. The warrior who cannot perform alone cannot truly perform at all. The mind that needs external validation is weak at its core. The spirit that requires others to feel confident will crumble when others disappear. But the warrior who has faced themselves in solitude, who has tested their limits without witnesses, who has developed their skills in silence, this warrior becomes dangerous to everyone because they are complete within themselves. Practice this discipline. Set aside time for solitary training. Work on your craft when no one is keeping score. Develop skills that no one will see until you choose to reveal them. Train your mind to be comfortable with silence. Develop your abilities without needing approval. Build your confidence on the foundation of private preparation, not public performance. When you are comfortable being alone with your thoughts, you become impossible to mentally destabilize. When you can perform at your best without an audience, you become unshakable under any pressure. Train alone. Fight everyone. The mountain makes you strong. The world tests your strength. Presence precedes power. Let them feel you before you move. The greatest victories are won before the first blow is struck, not through words or threats, but through the invisible force that radiates from a warrior who has mastered themselves completely. I discovered this truth during a duel with a master swordsman who had never been defeated. As we faced each other, I felt something change in the space between us. Without moving a muscle, without saying a word, I projected such focused intention that he began to sweat before either of us had drawn our swords. He had felt the presence of his own defeat. This is the power that cannot be taught in any school. The ability to control the battlefield with your mind before your body ever enters combat. It's the invisible weapon that strikes before any blade is drawn. Most people think presence is something you either have or you don't. They believe it's a natural gift, like height or speed. But presence is a skill that can be developed, refined, and weaponized through proper training. Presence begins with internal certainty. When you know with absolute conviction that you belong in any space, that space begins to conform to your energy. When you move with the confidence of someone who has already won, others begin to believe you have already won. This is not arrogance. Arrogance is loud, desperate, and ultimately weak. True presence is quiet, calm, and utterly certain. It doesn't need to announce itself because it fills every room it enters. I learned to cultivate this presence through meditation and visualization. Before every important encounter, I would spend time imagining myself moving through the space with perfect confidence and control. I would visualize my opponent's reactions, their hesitations, their growing uncertainty in the face of my unwavering calm. Here's what most people don't understand about controlling space. It's not about taking up physical room, it's about commanding psychological territory. The warrior who controls the mental space controls the entire encounter. But let me ask you this. How do you enter important spaces? Do you shrink and hope not to be noticed, or do you expand and claim your rightful place? Do you apologize for your presence, or do you trust that you belong exactly where you are? Your energy either adds to a space or subtracts from it. It either strengthens the environment or weakens it. It either enhances what's happening or diminishes it. This is a choice you make with every step, every breath, every moment of attention. The undefeated mind enters every space as if it were designed specifically for their presence, not because they're superior to others, but because they refuse to diminish themselves to make others comfortable. I practiced this by walking into rooms full of hostile samurai and maintaining perfect composure while they tested my resolve, would enter their space, take my position, and radiate such calm confidence that their aggression would gradually transform into respect. This wasn't magic. It was the result of thousands of hours spent developing unshakable self-possession. When you truly know who you are and what you're capable of, that knowledge creates an invisible field of influence around you. People can sense authenticity. They can feel genuine confidence. They can detect the difference between someone who is trying to project strength and someone who simply is strong. The warrior who has to announce their power has very little power. The mind that has to demand respect hasn't earned respect. The presence that has to force attention isn't truly commanding attention, but the warrior who has faced themselves in solitude, who has tested their limits and found them solid, who has developed their skills to the point of unconscious competence. This warrior enters any space like water, filling a container, naturally and completely. Practice developing this invisible influence. Before entering important meetings, spend a moment centering yourself and imagining the space responding positively to your presence. Before engaging in crucial conversations, visualize yourself speaking with quiet authority and being heard clearly. Train your nervous system to remain calm under scrutiny. Practice maintaining your center when others are testing you. Develop the ability to remain unchanged by others' emotions while influencing them through your stability. Your presence is your first strike. Your energy is your first weapon. Your confidence is your first victory. Control the space before the strike. Win the battle before it begins. Precision is not rage, it's resolve. Remove what is weak without hesitation, without noise. The cleanest cut I ever made was also the most necessary. My opponent was a former ally who had betrayed not just me, but the innocent people we had sworn to protect. When we finally faced each other, I felt no anger, no hatred, no satisfaction in what had to be done, only clarity. I struck once. He fell. I walked away. There was nothing personal in it, nothing emotional about it. It was simply the removal of something that needed to be removed, like pruning a diseased branch from a healthy tree. This is the way of the undefeated mind. When action is necessary, it acts without emotional interference. When cutting is required, it cuts without hesitation or drama. When something must be eliminated, it is eliminated cleanly and completely. Most people cannot separate emotion from action. When they're angry, they strike in rage. When they're hurt, they react from pain. When they're afraid, they lash out in desperation. This emotional contamination makes every action sloppy, unpredictable, and ultimately less effective. The warrior who cuts with emotion cuts poorly. Anger makes the blade heavy. Fear makes it trembling. Hatred makes it crude. Only calm precision creates the clean cut that solves the problem permanently. I learned this lesson after watching too many warriors let emotion cloud their judgment. They would become so focused on making their opponent suffer that they would miss opportunities for quick, decisive victory. They wanted to express their feelings more than they wanted to win. This is backwards thinking. Victory first, feelings later. Here's what most people don't understand about cutting without emotion. It doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you don't let feelings control your actions. You acknowledge the emotion, then choose your response based on effectiveness, not expression. But let me ask you this. Where in your life are you cutting with emotion instead of precision? What situations are you handling with drama instead of efficiency? Where are you letting feelings make your actions sloppy? The undefeated mind treats every necessary cut as surgery, not revenge. The goal is to remove what doesn't serve while preserving what does. Clean, quick, final. This applies to more than physical combat. Sometimes you must cut toxic relationships from your life. Sometimes you must eliminate habits that weaken you. Sometimes you must remove activities that drain your energy without providing value. These cuts should be made with the same emotional detachment as a surgeon removing diseased tissue. Not with anger at the disease, not with sadness about the loss, but with clear focus on restoring health. I practiced this detachment by training myself to see problems as puzzles to solve rather than personal attacks to endure. When someone betrayed me, I didn't waste energy on hurt feelings. I focused on what needed to be done to protect myself and others from future betrayal. When I had to end a friendship that had become destructive, I didn't dramatize the decision or try to make the other person understand my pain. I simply stopped participating in the relationship and redirected my energy toward people who deserved it. This is not coldness, it's efficiency. It's not heartlessness, it's wisdom. The emotional energy you save by cutting cleanly can be invested in building something better. The clean cut heals faster than the ragged wound. The decisive action creates less ongoing pain than the hesitant half measure. The clear boundary prevents more suffering than the blurred line. When you cut without emotion, you cut more accurately. You remove exactly what needs to be removed without damaging what should be preserved. You solve problems instead of creating new ones. Practice this discipline daily. When you must say no, say it clearly without elaborate explanation. When you must end something, end it completely without dragging out the process. When you must remove something from your life, remove it quietly without announcing your intentions to the world. The sharpest blade makes the cleanest cut. The calmest mind makes the wisest decisions. The most precise action creates the best outcomes. Cut without emotion. Remove what is weak. Preserve what is strong. The way demands this clarity. Practice it until it becomes natural. Hesitation kills. Act cleanly. Move fully. Trust your training or lose the fight. The moment I saw the opening, I moved. No second guessing, no careful consideration, no weighing of options. My opponent had dropped his guard for less than a heartbeat, and in that instant, my sword found its target. He was still planning his next move when the duel ended. This is the difference between the warrior who wins and the warrior who thinks about winning. When the moment arrives, there is no time for debate. no space for doubt, no opportunity for hesitation. There is only action or defeat. The mind that hesitates has already lost. The body that delays has already been beaten. The spirit that doubts has already surrendered. Most people believe that careful consideration leads to better decisions. They think that taking time to analyze options produces superior outcomes. In many areas of life, this may be true. But in the moment of truth, when opportunity presents itself for a split second, analysis is the enemy of victory. I learned this lesson watching a cat hunt mice. The cat doesn't debate whether to pounce. It doesn't weigh the pros and cons of attacking. When the moment is right, it moves with absolute commitment and devastating speed. The mice that survive are not the ones who see the cat coming. They're the ones who move instantly when they sense danger. The undefeated mind operates with this same instinctive precision. It prepares thoroughly, then trusts that preparation completely when action is required. Here's what most people don't understand about moving without delay. It's not about being reckless or impulsive. It's about being so well prepared that when the right moment comes, you recognize it instantly and act without internal conflict. But let me ask you this. How many opportunities have you lost to hesitation? How many perfect moments have passed while you were still deciding whether to act? How many victories have you surrendered to doubt? The warrior who moves without delay has done the thinking in advance. They have visualized the scenarios, practiced the responses, and prepared the mind for instant recognition of opportunity. When the moment arrives, there is no need to think, only to execute. I spent countless hours training not just my techniques, but my ability to recognize the split-second opportunities when those techniques could be applied. I practiced reading the subtle signs that revealed when an opponent was vulnerable, then drilled my responses until they became automatic. This preparation allowed me to act with what appeared to be supernatural speed, but was actually the result of eliminating the delay between perception and action. The doubt that kills is not the doubt about whether you can win. It's the doubt about whether this is the right moment to try. While you're debating timing, your opponent is acting. While you're considering options, they're executing their plan. Strike without doubt doesn't mean strike without wisdom. It means that when your wisdom tells you the moment is right, you trust that wisdom completely and act with total commitment. Half-hearted action produces half-hearted results. Tentative strikes miss their targets. Hesitant movements telegraph their intentions. Doubtful warriors defeat themselves before their opponents ever engage them. But the warrior who moves with full commitment transforms every action into a force that others must respond to rather than a gesture they can ignore. This principle extends beyond physical combat. In business, the company that moves decisively when opportunity appears captures markets that hesitant competitors miss. In relationships, the person who acts on genuine connection creates bonds that the uncertain never experience. Practice this. Commitment in small ways, daily. When you decide to do something, do it immediately without second-guessing yourself. When you see an opportunity to help someone, act without debating whether it's your responsibility. When you recognize a moment to speak truth, speak without calculating the consequences. Train your nervous system to move from decision to action without the pause where doubt lives. Develop the ability to trust your preparation so completely that execution becomes automatic. The opening will not wait for you to become ready. The opportunity will not pause while you gather courage. The moment will not extend itself to accommodate your hesitation. Move without delay. Strike without doubt. Trust your training completely. The way demands this faith in your preparation. Honor it with committed action. Complexity is distraction. Strip everything down to its essence. Then cut through. My most famous victory came with a weapon I carved from a boat oar on the way to the duel. While my opponent carried an ornate blade forged by master craftsmen, I wielded a simple piece of wood shaped by necessity. He was defeated by simplicity itself. The elaborate sword, for all its beauty and reputation, was still just a tool for cutting. My crude wooden blade served the same essential function. The difference was not in our weapons. It was in our understanding of what truly mattered. He was distracted by the complexity of his technique, the weight of his reputation, the pressure of expectations. I was focused on the simple truth of combat, strike effectively, while avoiding being struck. This is the power of simplicity. It cuts through confusion to reach the heart of what actually matters. Most people believe that complexity equals sophistication. They think that complicated solutions are more impressive than simple ones. They mistake elaborate methods for effective methods. This belief makes them vulnerable to anyone who understands the beauty of essential action. The undefeated mind strips away everything that doesn't serve the core objective. It eliminates distractions, abandons unnecessary complications, and focuses laser-like attention on what actually produces results. I learned this by watching nature. The most effective predators use simple strategies executed perfectly. The hawk doesn't complicate its hunt with elaborate maneuvers. It spots prey, positions itself, and strikes with devastating directness. The tsunami doesn't employ complex techniques. It simply moves forward with unstoppable force. Simplicity is not simple to achieve. It requires deep understanding to know what can be eliminated without losing effectiveness. It takes wisdom to distinguish between essential elements and decorative additions. Here's what most people don't understand about simplicity. It's not about having fewer tools. It's about needing fewer tools because you've mastered the fundamental ones completely. But let me ask you this. Where in your life are you using complexity to avoid mastery? What elaborate systems are you maintaining that could be replaced by simple excellence? How much energy are you wasting on complications that don't improve results? The master chef can create extraordinary meals with basic ingredients because they understand flavor at its deepest level. The skilled musician can move audiences with simple melodies because they've mastered the essential elements of emotional expression. The effective leader can solve complex problems with straightforward decisions because they see clearly to the heart of issues. I practice this simplification by regularly reducing my techniques to their core components. Could I achieve the same result with fewer movements? Could I eliminate unnecessary flourishes without losing effectiveness? Could I strip away everything decorative to reveal the deadly essence beneath? This practice taught me that most of what people consider advanced technique is actually unnecessary complication. The truly advanced warrior doesn't need complex moves because their simple moves are perfectly executed and perfectly timed. Simplicity also creates unpredictability. When you use elaborate techniques, experienced opponents can read your intentions because they recognize the patterns. But when you use fundamental movements with perfect timing and positioning, you become harder to anticipate because you're not following any recognizable system. The simple approach is also more reliable under pressure. Complex techniques fall apart when stress disrupts careful coordination, but simple, well-drilled fundamentals become more automatic under pressure, not less. Practice this in every area of your life. Look for the essential elements that produce most of your results, then eliminate everything else. Find the core principles that drive success in your field, then master them completely rather than chasing advanced complications. Simplify your daily routines until they serve your objectives, without wasting energy on unnecessary steps. Streamline your decision-making processes until they produce clear action without endless deliberation. When you speak, use fewer words to say more. When you act, make fewer movements that accomplish more. When you plan, create simpler strategies that are easier to execute perfectly. The sword that cuts deepest is often the simplest one. The mind that sees clearest is often the least cluttered one. The warrior who wins most consistently is often the one who complicates least. Wear simplicity like a sword. Let it cut through confusion to reveal truth. Let it slice through complication to expose what actually matters. The way is simple. That's what makes it profound. Humility keeps you sharp. Dependency makes you soft. The greatest lesson I learned came from the humblest teacher, a farmer who had never held a sword in his life. I was traveling through his village when bandits attacked. While I reached for my weapon, he grabbed a simple farming tool and dispatched 3 attackers with movements so efficient they seemed choreographed. I had respected his knowledge of farming. I had not respected his potential as a warrior. This oversight nearly cost both of us our lives. From that day forward, I chose to respect every person I encountered, regardless of their appearance, status, or obvious abilities. But I also chose to rely completely on my own preparation, regardless of what help might be available. This is the balance that creates unshakable strength. Honor everyone's potential while depending on no one's promise. Most people get this backwards. They disrespect those they consider beneath them while becoming dependent on those they consider above them. They underestimate enemies while overestimating allies. They dismiss the humble while worshiping the powerful. This creates 2 fatal weaknesses: blindness to unexpected threats and vulnerability to predictable betrayals. The undefeated mind operates differently. It assumes that everyone possesses hidden capabilities that could prove either helpful or dangerous. It prepares for situations where all support disappears and only personal skill remains. Respect all doesn't mean fear all or trust all. It means acknowledge that every person has something to teach, something to offer, or something to threaten. The beginner might reveal a flaw in your technique. The elder might share wisdom that transforms your understanding. The enemy might demonstrate a weakness you didn't know you had. But rely on none means that your success never depends on others acting according to your expectations. Your plans work even if allies abandon you. Your skills function even if support disappears. Your strength endures even if everyone else fails. Here's what most people don't understand about this balance. Respect makes you more effective, while reliance makes you more vulnerable. The more you can learn from others, the stronger you become. The more you need from others, the weaker you become. But let me ask you this: who are you dismissing that might surprise you? What help are you depending on that might disappear? Where have you become vulnerable through reliance rather than strong through preparation? I learned to treat every encounter as a learning opportunity while building skills that needed no external support. I studied techniques from drunk peasants and refined nobles equally. I gathered knowledge from anyone willing to share it while developing capabilities that belonged to me alone. This approach created a paradox that served me well. The more I learned from others, the less I needed from others. Every piece of knowledge I gathered became part of my independent arsenal. Every skill I developed became a resource I could access regardless of circumstances. The warrior who respects all gains access to wisdom from every source. The warrior who relies on none cannot be defeated by betrayal, abandonment, or the simple failure of others to meet expectations. I practiced this by deliberately placing myself in situations where normal support systems weren't available. I traveled alone through hostile territory. I solved problems without consulting advisors. I faced challenges using only skills I had personally mastered. Each test proved that respect for others enhanced my capabilities, while self-reliance preserved my freedom. I could learn from anyone without becoming dependent on them. I could appreciate help without requiring it. This balance also creates the optimal relationship with both success and failure. When others contribute to your victories, you can appreciate their help without crediting them with your achievement. When others contribute to your setbacks, you can acknowledge their impact without blaming them for your responsibility. Respect all by staying curious about what each person might teach you. Study their methods, understand their perspectives, learn from their experiences. But keep this knowledge as addition to your capabilities, not replacement for them. Rely on none by building skills that function independently of external support. Develop backup plans that assume help won't come. Create capabilities that belong to you regardless of what others choose to do. The farmer who saved us that day taught me something no swordmaster ever had. That effectiveness often hides in unexpected places. But he also demonstrated something equally important, that when crisis comes, you must act with whatever skills you possess in that moment. Respect the potential in everyone. Rely on the preparation within yourself. This balance creates unshakable strength and endless opportunity for growth. Train as if the battle waits just around the bend, because it does. The attack that nearly ended my life came not during a formal duel or battlefield engagement, but while I was eating dinner at a seemingly peaceful inn. 3 assassins had waited for the moment when they thought I was most relaxed, most vulnerable, most human. They were wrong about my vulnerability, but right about their timing. In that instant between reaching for my rice bowl and recognizing the threat, everything I had trained for in times of peace proved its worth in a moment of war. My sword was in my hand before their blades cleared their sheaths. Not because I had expected this specific attack, but because I had prepared for the unexpected attack that could come at any moment. This is the way of the undefeated mind. It never stops being ready, even when readiness seems unnecessary. Most people divide their lives into times of conflict and times of peace, as if these were separate realities requiring different approaches. They prepare intensely for known challenges while relaxing completely during apparent safety. This creates a vulnerability that enemies learn to exploit. They strike not when you're ready for battle, but when you're living as if battle were impossible. The warrior who survives understands that peace and war are not separate conditions. They are different faces of the same continuous reality. The preparation never stops. The awareness never sleeps. The readiness never takes a vacation. But here's what most people don't understand about maintaining constant readiness. It's not about living in fear or paranoia. It's about developing capabilities so thoroughly that they become natural rather than effortful. The master swordsman doesn't strain to stay alert during dinner. His awareness has become his natural state. The skilled warrior doesn't have to force readiness during peaceful moments. Readiness has become who they are, not something they do. I learned this by observing animals in the wild. The deer that survives is not the one that stops eating too. Scan for predators every few seconds. That deer would starve. It's the deer that has developed the ability to remain alert while grazing, to sense danger while appearing relaxed. This integration of readiness with normal life is what separates the truly prepared from the merely trained. Let me ask you this: where in your life are you vulnerable because you've assumed safety? What areas have you left unguarded because conflict seems unlikely? When do you let your awareness drop because everything appears peaceful? The undefeated mind treats apparent peace as a training ground for invisible war. It uses quiet moments to sharpen skills that sudden crisis will demand. It practices responses during calm times, so they'll be automatic during chaotic ones. This doesn't mean you can't enjoy peaceful moments. It means you enjoy them with full awareness that they could change instantly. You appreciate calm while staying ready for storm. You savor safety while maintaining the capability to handle danger. I practiced this by training during the most relaxed moments of daily life. I would practice drawing my sword while eating, walking, even sleeping. I developed the ability to transition from complete rest to full combat readiness in a single heartbeat. More importantly, I trained my mind to process multiple layers of information simultaneously. I could engage in normal conversation while monitoring escape routes, potential weapons, and suspicious behavior patterns. This dual awareness became as natural as breathing. The peace that makes you weak is false peace. True peace comes from strength so complete that you can afford to be gentle, readiness so thorough that you can afford to be relaxed, preparation so deep that you can afford to be present. When you're truly ready for anything, you can fully enjoy everything. When you've Prepared for the worst possibilities, you can appreciate the best realities. When you've trained for sudden violence, you can savor quiet beauty. This constant readiness also creates a presence that deters most conflicts before they begin. Predators, whether physical or psychological, instinctively avoid targets that seem prepared to respond effectively. Your readiness becomes invisible protection. Practice this awareness in daily life. Notice exit routes when you enter buildings. Observe the people around you without staring at them. Keep your skills sharp even when you don't expect to need them. Develop the ability to shift from relaxation to action without losing time to surprise or confusion. Train your responses until they're faster than your thoughts. Build awareness that operates below the level of conscious attention. The battle is always closer than it appears. The threat is always more likely than it seems. The moment of truth is always sooner than expected. Never be caught off guard, even in peace, especially in peace. This isn't natural, it's earned. Through repetition, through struggle, through silence. Every single day, I was not born undefeated. I was born like every other child, weak, dependent, knowing nothing about strength or strategy or the way of the warrior. My first sword felt impossibly heavy. My first stance was awkward and unbalanced. My first opponent, a boy barely older than myself, defeated me so thoroughly that I questioned whether I had any talent for combat at all. But I had. Something more valuable than natural talent. I had the willingness to build what I lacked. Every morning for decades, I chose construction over comfort. I chose the discipline of development over the ease of acceptance. I chose the pain of becoming over the safety of remaining. This is the truth that most people refuse to accept. The undefeated mind is not a gift you receive, it's a fortress you build. Stone by stone, day by day, choice by choice. Most people search for shortcuts to strength, looking for the secret technique or hidden knowledge that will instantly transform them from ordinary to extraordinary. They want to find their power rather than forge it. But power is not buried treasure waiting to be discovered. It's raw material waiting to be shaped. Strength is not a natural resource waiting to be tapped. It's a structure waiting to be constructed. The undefeated mind is built through daily practices that seem insignificant in isolation but create invincibility through accumulation. One perfect cut means nothing. 10,000 perfect cuts create unstoppable skill. Here's what most people don't understand about building mental invincibility. It requires treating small moments as seriously as great occasions. The character that emerges in crisis is forged in quiet training sessions when no one is watching. But let me ask you this. What are you building each day? What mental muscles are you strengthening through repetition? What inner architecture are you constructing through consistent choice? Every time you choose discipline over impulse, you build willpower. Every time you choose truth over comfort, you build wisdom. Every time you choose action over hesitation, you build courage. Every time you choose growth over safety, you build strength. These daily choices seem small, but they accumulate into the foundation that holds firm when everything else shakes. The mind that has been built through thousands of small victories doesn't collapse during large challenges. I constructed my undefeated mindset through practices that others considered boring, unnecessary, or excessive. I repeated basic techniques long after I had mastered them, because mastery is not a destination. It's a practice that must be maintained. I meditated daily not because I enjoyed sitting still, but because stillness teaches the mind to remain centered when everything around it moves. I studied philosophy not because I loved reading, but because wisdom creates the framework for intelligent action. I practiced sword work in rain, snow, darkness, and exhaustion. Not because conditions were ideal, but because real battles don't wait for perfect circumstances. Each practice session was a choice to build rather than coast, to construct rather than consume, to earn rather than expect. The building never stops. Even now, after decades of training, I continue choosing development over comfort. The undefeated mind is not a permanent achievement. It's a daily reconstruction. Project, this is why most people fail to develop genuine inner strength. They build inconsistently, stopping whenever they feel they've done enough. They treat mental development like a sprint rather than a lifetime construction project. But the warrior who understands that strength is built, not found, commits to the daily work regardless of mood, circumstances, or immediate results. They show up to train when they don't feel like training. They practice when progress seems invisible. They build when building feels pointless. This commitment creates a compound effect that appears miraculous to outside observers, but feels natural to the builder. Others see sudden strength where you know there were years of quiet construction. Start building today. Choose one practice that develops mental strength and commit to it regardless of feelings or circumstances. Make it small enough to sustain, but significant enough to matter. Build your awareness through daily observation. Build your discipline through consistent training. Build your courage through regular challenges. Build your wisdom through constant learning. The undefeated mind is not your birthright, it's your choice. It's not your inheritance, it's your investment. It's not what you are, it's what you build. Every day you choose to build rather than drift, you become stronger. Every moment you choose construction over comfort. You move closer to invincibility. You already have what it takes. Now, go prove it.